Well, welcome once again to, I guess you can call this now a fireside chat with me and Pastor Vinny, although there's no fire here anywhere in the background. But we wanted to have a discussion today that was a bit more lighthearted. I mentioned that last week in the kind of introduction to what we talked about last week, which is obviously a very serious issue. But the more lighthearted discussion we wanted to have today was on the Enneagram. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but a lot of people have been talking about it. And so I asked Pastor Vinny if we could maybe talk about that to see if he's heard it all about it. And then in the Enneagram, it has 9 different types. And so I asked Pastor Vinny if he would take the test and release his results, and I'll share mine as well. So I guess the first place to start is Pastor Vinny, as the counselor, if someone were to come to you and ask you what's this Enneagram thing about, what is that? Tell the people that are listening what it's about.
Sure. I've always been interested in personality assessments. When I was a teenager, I remember reading the book Spirit-Filled Temperament by Tim LaHaye, and I was just engrossed in reading it. I should have known then that I was going to be a counselor, but I had no idea at the time what was going on. I just knew I was interested in it. There's other things other than the Enneagram. A lot of people are familiar with Myers and Briggs. That's like a 16 personality types that you can potentially be. I've never quite understood that one as much as I've tried to. It's too complicated for my brain. There's another one called DISC, D-I-S, SC maybe, yeah. And that one's like an 8-factor one where there's 8 different factors, and that one resonates with me more. In that one, I'm called a coordinator, and I definitely resonate with that. That I like to coordinate things and be into the details of putting things together. There's another one that's called just like a simple 4-factor one that's called the lion, the beaver, the otter, and the golden retriever. That was made popular by Smalley and Trent, who are Christian writers. They wrote a book. I think it's called The Two Sides of Love, maybe, where they talked about that. I'm a beaver in that one, which means I like to work. I like to work hard. But the Enneagram, what it does is it aims to reveal how our emotions drive our lives, how we engage with others in an effort to get what we want and what we need. The Enneagram defines 9 different personality types, and each one of them has a set of strengths and a set of weaknesses and a set of opportunities for personal growth. And I was interested to see that the two of us got the same result.
Yeah, that was very that was shocking to me. So I guess the big reveal is, if from Crossroads Community Church, if you're watching this, both of your pastors are 3s, which means that we're both achievers. But what it also means, and I guess that I should say the reason I was surprised is I was expecting for some reason Pastor Vinny to be a 4, and that's because that's sort of more of a heartfelt. And so, since you were a counselor, I thought that's what you were going to be. But I should say, 2s, 3s, and 4s are all generally, I think they say they live from the heart, which I thought that was interesting as well. So, and I will say this for those who are watching this, at least I'll just speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for Pastor Vinny, but if you go online now and you read about what the 3s are like, I'll have to say, when I first saw that, I had to agree that it was true about me. But there was also something that I didn't like about it, and thought, man, this is, in other words, as I read it, I tended to think, wow, this is what it says my strengths are, I would regard as a weakness for myself personally. But it did make me understand why failure is so hard for me. So, but let me ask Pastor Vinny. So, since I guess we're both achievers, did you ever, looking back now in your life, can you see that was always there, or how do you think about it now?
Well, this is sort of a family trait for me. My family is competitive. I think about my grandmother in the nursing home. She was always at the top of the list of people and the activities that they did. She was always like at the top 1, 2, or 3. She's very competitive with the activities there. My dad was a big sportsman, enjoyed playing different sports, and always tried to excel at them. So I inherited, I guess, in my genes, and I can see it in some of my kids as well. In high school, it was basketball. I wanted to be the best basketball player I could be in my conference. That led me to want to play in college. But then that turned into my studies in college. I remember one time, if I was bored in class, I would have another project that I would be working on that might be like my own project that had nothing to do with school. And that was one of the things that Heather noticed about me, is how hardworking was. If I was bored in a class, I was creating like a thesaurus that would help me pick out the right words for like when I became a pastor and needed those words for the particular sermon or to make a particular point in a sermon. So, and then later I kind of turned that into a drive to learn about counseling and how to help people the way that God would want us to. So I think a unique part of the assessment that highlighted for me is the word adaptability. Yes, I'm an achiever. Yes, I want to achieve things, but also there's a certain adaptability that I have, and that's where I try to align myself with people and projects that matter to me. And I can definitely see a pattern of this in my life, how I've sought out opportunities, or rather how God has sought out opportunities for me and I have stepped into them. But basically it was like me trying to, in some ways, achieve or to put myself in a place where I could achieve. And certainly I, have achieved more being connected to other people than I would have, on my own.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's funny. Maybe it's an Italian thing, maybe it's a guy thing. But yeah, as I look at that, it would obviously for me as well. As I look back in my earlier life, it was all sports. So yeah, it was definitely, I wanted to be the best baseball player. Then I eventually got tired of that. And so I wanted to be the best basketball player. I would say that's probably what drove me to join the Marine Corps was, once I heard that the Marines were supposed, in military terms, since Marines are the best, I was like, why would I join the Navy? Why would I join the Army? Or, I'm not going to join the chair force. So, I definitely see that looking back, but it does also say on that, on the Enneagram that, so one of the more difficult things for people like you and me is going to be dealing with failure. And I guess I can segue into that just to say, because in a way it relates to sports. That's one of the reasons why, when I got to high school, I tried wrestling. I've shared this with some people in our church. Once I tried wrestling, and that's what was the most difficult thing for me, was it was the only sport really that I tried that no matter how hard I practiced, how hard I tried, I just never was really good at it. It was really, really difficult. So yeah, it also probably didn't help that it just so happened in God's providence, I guess, for him to humble me, that the high school that I went to, wrestling was the best sport. The team was undefeated 3 years in a row. We had a really, really good coach, and I was wrestling in the 145-pound division. And the guy who was on varsity, who was ahead of me, was literally the biggest 145-pounder I've ever seen in my life. Everybody on the team was like, "There's no way that guy is 145 pounds," and so there was just no way for me to get over that hump. You know what I mean? There was, and so that was something that, as a sport, that it was. It's really kind of been a defining moment in my life, just because I look back on it and I'm still angry that I was never that I was never good at it. And it was funny because I'll just share this now. People will know that before we moved to Massachusetts, I was in Iowa, and Iowa was like one of the biggest wrestling, states in the country. And so, going to watch Iowa Hawkeyes wrestling matches brought back all those feelings of, man, I've never got over that. But anyways, so have you seen that in your life as well as an achiever? If you look back, have failures been more difficult, you think, for you to deal with versus other people?
I know that I failed quite a bit. My first job didn't work out. My second job didn't work out. My third job didn't work out long term. My fourth job had a 7-year run and then failed. I probably spent an inordinate amount of time processing those things that failed, whether it was me failing or whether it was just an organizational failure or project failure or whatever. But particularly also I found out, taking the Enneagram, that another trait that was just as high as achieving was perfectionism. Was like the second one, and they had the same percentage. So I don't know how the Enneagram came out and said achiever above perfectionist, but so if I want to achieve something and I want to do it perfectly, that's going to be pretty hard on the failure part, right? So when you combine those two, I can see that that's been difficult for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then now I'm just curious, because I was going to ask you this. I remember reading a book by a counselor by the name of Chuck DeGroat, and he was talking about perfectionism. And he said when he hears somebody that he's talking with or counseling say that they're a perfectionist, he says what immediately comes to his mind is, this is someone that struggles with shame. I think probably as a counselor, does that resonate with you? I think because if we're saying we're a perfectionist, we don't want to be found out as imperfect. And I remember when I read that, I thinking to myself, there was a part of me, probably sinfully, that wanted to disagree with him. But then as I thought about it more, I'm like, you know what? I think he's probably right. I think he's probably right about that.
I would have said
So
no, like right offhand, but as you
yeah,
kept talking, I can hear my mom when I was a kid telling me
yeah,
like how to do my chores and telling me that doing it halfway was not an
right.
option. And just the perfection that she wanted in the way that I cleaned my room, for instance, that still drives me, even though, my mom died in 1984, but that,
Mhm,
those early, years, those first 10 years that she had me, she instilled like that work
mhm.
hard and do things right kind of attitude in me. And it's uh it's always been there.
Stuck it. Yeah. Well, this talk that we've had, before we wrap things up, we'll say this is just me and Pastor Vinny kind of thinking out loud. And the reason why I brought it up, as I said, is the Enneagram. Some people, think it's a wonderful thing. Some would, if you Google it and read some Christian websites, you'll undoubtedly come across some that say don't take the Enneagram. So the way I look at it is it's just taking it with a grain of salt. It has helped me as I've looked at it, helped me understand myself, but sure, it's not the Bible. And I think the fear some Christians have is this falling into what we might call a self-fulfilling prophecy, as
Mhm.
some would say, that you say, now my wife knows that I'm a 3, and so she doesn't talk to me like I want her to talk to me. I'm gonna say, I'm a 3, right? Why are you talking like me like that? And it comes a way for us to
Yeah.
to justify our sin, basically, or areas in our lives that we need to work on. So I guess as you kind of close this out, Pastor Vinny, any thoughts you would share with people who are listening to this, how they should think and process Enneagram?
Yeah, I would, encourage people to find a good Christian organization that has a well thought out plan around the Enneagram, because I've noticed there's some really weird stuff out there about it. So
Mhm.
find a group that you trust that talks about this if you want to learn more about it. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And I'll also say this as a way, it may be a more humorous way. I did, when I was doing some research on the internet, I did find a lot of churches are using this, for their staff. And I even noticed one church doing a sermon series on it. So I just want to put everybody at ease from Crossroads who's watching this. I promise I won't be doing a sermon series on Enneagram. We'll stick with the Bible. Okay. So until next time, that's just what you need to know. All
Right.
right. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye bye.